man when you were formally inducted into La Cosa Nostra.
You like the way that word sounds, La Cosa Nostra, how it flows on your tongue?
No one is likely to be watching the story more closely than the FBI.
You break rules, you end up in a dumpster.
It's the first extended TV interview John Gotti Jr. has ever done. He talks about his life as a made member of the Gambino crime family, following in the footsteps of his famous father, the Dapper Don, John Gotti Sr.
Obviously, he spent a lot of time in prison for murder. How do you justify that?
I don't know if you could ever justify murder. I don't know if you could justify it, but I could make some type of an argument. You want to hear it?
Sure.
Okay.
The unveiling was a major happening this past Thursday.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a new species of human ancestor.
He lived almost 2 million years ago, and his skull is so well preserved you can count his teeth, which are very much like ours. He was found by a 9-year-old boy, and he could change our understanding of where we came from. We were given rare access to the discovery, which is already being described as one of the most remarkable of our time.
I'm Steve Croft.
I'm Leslie Stahl.
I'm Bob Simon.
I'm Morley Safer.
I'm Byron Pitts. I'm Scott Pelley. Those stories and Andy Rooney tonight on 60 Minutes.
For nearly 3 decades, the name Gotti has been synonymous with organized crime in America. According to the federal government, John Gotti Sr. and later his son, John Jr., ran the Gambino crime family, the largest, most influential mafia family in the country. Gotti Sr., who died in prison 8 years ago, was a ruthless gangster who craved celebrity. The son, if you're to believe his story, wanted out, and John Gotti Jr. wants people to believe his story. After the federal government put him on trial 4 times in the last 5 years without getting a conviction, he agreed to sit down with us and talk about his family saga in his first extended television interview. He wanted to be the only person we talked to on camera for this story and to have his lawyer by his side to make sure he didn't say anything that could be used to indict him again, because no one is likely to be watching this story more closely than the FBI.
My father was my cause. If my father wasn't in that life, I probably wouldn't have been in the street life either. Whatever he was is what I wanted to be. And if he decided the next day, you know what, I don't like this anymore, I'm going to be a butcher, I would tell him, I hope you have a smock for me. That's the way I feel. That's the way I felt.
You can tell he still worships his father.
Handsome as ever. Handsome as ever.
Not just with the love of a son, but with some of the same misguided romanticism that has long drawn the news media and the public to the mob culture. And John Gotti Sr. was the most famous mobster of his generation. He ascended to the top of the Gambino crime family by organizing the assassination of his predecessor, Paul Castellano, outside a popular Manhattan steakhouse. It was a stylistic statement that Gotti Sr. would accentuate with $2,000 Italian suits and hand-painted ties, earning him a certain brand of celebrity and a nickname, the Dapper Don. In New York, a city that worships power of any kind, Gotti's reached beyond gambling and loan sharking into the garment center, the garbage business, and the construction industry. And he wanted everyone to know what he did, as long as they couldn't prove it.
Now, a friend of your father's told me there's nothing he loved better than being a gangster.
Nothing. Nothing.
What did he love about it?
Everything. There was nothing he didn't like about it. My father lived that life 24/7. 24/7. In fact, his wife and kids were second to the streets. He loved it. He loved the code. He loved the action.
Was that more important than money?
He hated money. He used to say, if a guy was saving money or putting money away, and he was a street guy, he would say, what's on his mind? What's he got planned? You know, at the end of the day, we're all going to jail. What's he going to do with that money?
Is that the way he looked at life?
He felt that anybody who really, truly lived in the streets, not the fringe players, not the frauds, not the pretenders, if you really, truly lived it like John did, at the end of the day, You got to die or go to jail. That's the rules. That's the way it was.
It was part of the gangster ethos that permeated the working-class Italian neighborhoods of New York 50 years ago, where John Jr. grew up with his brothers Frank and Peter and sisters Victoria and Angel. His father was absent for most of their childhood, serving a stretch at Lewisburg Penitentiary for cargo hijacking. Jr. was told his dad was off on business, but all the kids teased him that he didn't really have a father, until one day in 1972, when his father came home from prison.
Almost on cue, this brown Lincoln Continental Mark IV with smoked windows at the time when nobody had smoked windows comes rolling down the street. And it stops right by me. And the window rolls down. And I turn and I says, "There's my father." Everybody was in shock. He goes, "Where's the house?" Because he didn't know where we lived. So I says, "The second house off the corner of the green awning, Dad. I'll see you over there." And he pulls away. He's got a chocolate brown suit on with a chocolate brown overcoat and a cream-colored mock neck, and he looks the part. And he's beautiful. He looks beautiful. And everybody came out on the block to see him. And he turns down the block and gives like a regal wave, you know. Gives one of those waves, and he goes in like he owned the place, like he always belonged there, like it was always was his.
Did he talk about what he did for a living?
No, he didn't sit at the table and say, you know, by the way, my take from the numbers rackets are up this week. You know, it didn't go like that, nothing like that.
And he didn't have conversations like that with some of his friends?
No, other than my father being away from home, you know, being incarcerated and the hours that he kept. Our house was a pretty normal house.
Gotti says it wasn't until he was 14, when he was shipped off to boarding school at the New York Military Academy, that he found out exactly who his father was and what he did. And he learned it while watching a news program with his fellow cadets.
And I remember it was 1979, and we're watching a show, and they're saying, this man's a captain, and the Gambino family, and this, that, and the other thing, and they're talking about him, and I'm mortified. You know, I'm in the back row, and I'm watching this, and I'm not saying nothing. And they say, John Gotti, and they're talking. So now, suddenly, the other cadets start turning to look at me. So he's got the same name as you. Yeah, he certainly does. Another kid says, hey, wait a minute. That guy was here last week. And at that point, it's there. You know, there. Now it's all on the table, you know.
What was the reaction of your classmates?
I guess maybe some of them were intimidated. But most of them thought it was pretty cool. Does your father kill people? Does your father beat people up? Not around the house.
At some point, you must have come to the realization that he did outside of the house.
Probably. I don't know. In front of me? No.
How do you, as a young man, react to that?
From Howard Beach. I'm from Howard Beach. Pretty much we're taught from a young age that you don't call the cops for nothing. We take care of our own problems. And pretty much all your uncles, cousins, friends, father, they're all bouncing around the street in one shape or form, and this is the way it is.
You knew people were breaking the law.
Sure, sure.
And what you're saying is that wasn't considered necessarily a bad thing?
No, no, not at all.
Because?
Because everybody did it. You know what? The guy next to you was a car thief. The guy next to you on your left-hand side, he was a bookmaker. That's everybody.
It was the summer after he graduated from military school that Gotti discovered what he thought was his calling, hanging around his father's headquarters at the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club.
I'd go to the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club all the time. I wanted to be around him. And he had that type of a personality. And I would just watch. He's sitting around a social club, and they'd be playing cards, and they're hanging out, and they're breaking balls, and cooking, and laughing, and commiserating, and everything is going on. And you're right there. And you're saying, this is where I belong.
But it wasn't all pinochle and pasta. And as these prison videos show, John Gotti Sr. had a sadistic streak, even when dealing with his 10-year-old grandson, who he thought had showed him disrespect.
You get an ass kicking from me. I ain't your father or mother. I know how to raise children. For me,
He's being a smart aleck.
No, for me, you get an ass kicking.
Believe me, he'll
You
get
get
it
an
from
ass
me.
kicking, you'll never want it. You'll never forget the ass kicking you get from me.
This one shows Gotti telling his daughter how he would have dealt with an incident involving a neighbor.
You should have went there and told him, but listen, do you want me to tell my father? You want him to handle it his way? Do you want to wake up in the morning and don't see your son no more? Is that what you desire? Do you want us to cut his tongue out of his mouth? You don't have to.
And you had the sense he could do it.
He had a temper.
Volcanic.
Was that ever directed at you?
Well, I got in trouble as a kid once or twice. He'd give me a swift kick in the backside or a nice crack. Yeah, sure.
By 1982, John Jr. could dish it out as well